Hello and welcome to our Q&A with In the Earth with director Ben Wheatley. My name is Peter Kuplowsky and I'm a programmer here at TIFF, specifically in charge of the Midnight Madness program. Two words that I think very much apply to this film. Now, as you join us today, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you are on and who the traditional keepers of this land are and what that treaty relationship is, or if it's unceded territory. I'm located in the treaty lands of the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditionary territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are grateful to work on this land. I would also like to extend a sincere thank you to our lead sponsors, Bell, our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, as well as our major supporters at the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto for their continued support. I would also like to thank Elevation Pictures for providing us with this film. I'm thrilled to be joined by Ben Wheatley, whose work we've had the pleasure to present throughout the years, both at the festival and year-round at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, films such as Kill List, Sightseers, my personal favorite, Field in England, High Rise, and of course his 2016 Midnight Madness People's Choice Award winner, Free Fire. We are really excited to be opening Wheatley's latest film, In the Earth, a film that has been observed as kind of a spiritual sequel to A Field in England, shot in a mere 15 days in the heart of the pandemic last summer, 2020. In the Earth channels the anxiety of the times in true Wheatley style, with a phantasmagoric allegory set deep in the woods while a calamitous virus rages on around the globe. In the Earth opens on digital TIFF Bell Lightbox Friday, May 21st. Welcome, Mr. Wheatley. Ben, thanks so much for joining us. When I first saw the film at Sundance and was reading some of your interviews, John Carpenter's Halloween came up a lot with regards to the production, that the economy of that movie was sort of an inspiration for both the budget and schedule, or at least a kind of a beacon of confidence. Like, we can do this. If John Carpenter could do this on Halloween, we could do this within the Earth. But the other John Carpenter film I was thinking about was Prince of Darkness, and I was wondering if that was a film that was percolating at all as you wrote and developed this film.
Well, it's a particular favorite, Prince of Darkness, and I think it influences a lot of movies of mine. It certainly influenced Free Fire. The idea that you can have an action sequence which is just a man trying to dig a hole in a wall that goes on for about 40 minutes. I always thought that was amazing in that movie, and that's certainly a feature of Free Fire. But it wasn't, I think the general Carpenter-ness of stuff is something that is all pervasive, and it's always there, but it's not, I don't think about specific films particularly. I'm not someone who tries, I try not to reference stuff explicitly.
I think what struck me was this notion of scientists coming together to really try to understand something and kind of coming at it from different avenues, and all sort of fundamentally being changed by that experience.
Well, I would say that it's probably more to do with the Quatermass connections to Prince of Darkness. I'm coming at it from a Neil perspective and a kind of 70s British science fiction Doctor Who perspective as well. So I think that's probably, they're pouring into the same pot. But then also, I guess it's stuff like the original Thing is a big influence on me as well. Like the idea of teams of, I like scientists talking about stuff. I think it's good. And that film particularly, where it's almost like a school photograph, every scene was about 60 people crammed in or talking, I think that's great.
I mean, I love the exposition in this movie, because exposition is always a tricky thing in genre films, because it can sometimes just, drop the movie in its tracks. But there's a mania to the exposition in this film. There's a madness to it. And I'd love to hear about there's almost a comedy to it too, because it's so much. I'd love to hear about writing exposition and how to write it in a way that I feel like satisfies you as a writer, but also satisfies what the film needs from a comic and dramatic perspective.
Well, I've been kind of allergic to exposition for a while, and I've made movies with no exposition whatsoever in, and I kind of came round to it over the years. I quite enjoy it now, and certainly I think it's as I warmed towards exposition, I also warmed towards the cutaway, which is something I've never really done either. and I'm quite into cutaways now, shots of hands touching stuff and whatever. So it's a challenge always, because it's an info dump, and whether or not you're interested in if you're interested in the information, you don't notice it, but if you're not, then suddenly the film grinds to an absolute halt, so. But then I kind of came round, I think, from just watching loads of TV, which is mostly exposition. It's very the proportion of exposition to actual drama is kind of is very it's towards exposition. It's like 60-70% exposition. So, and I realised I was enjoying watching it. So why would I hold back?
Yeah, I mean, at the center of some of this exposition is the discussion of texts like the Hammer of Witches. Yeah. And this woodland spirit, Peneg Feg. Is Peneg Feg come from that text directly, or is that an invention of yours?
Well, I mean, the Hammer of the Witches is an invention.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense. It's pure nonsense. And so Peneg Feg is also nonsense.
Yeah.
And made up. And, and most things, witches aren't real. In that respect, there's white witches obviously is a different thing, but the idea of kind of magic and stuff is that has this kind of patina of being real, but isn't at all. So it's kind of the idea of the film is that it's more about the kind of how people with very small amounts of information conjure up quite complicated ideas of what may or may not have happened at any single time. So. And the idea was that in the film that the Hammer of the Witches itself, the book it's not the actual book either. It's like a book that's been rebound. And so there's other stuff in it that's much older. So say the characters, and then when you get to it, it's like, what is this stuff? And then they're spieling off onto other things, like the idea that the line with the local dialect, Parnag meaning light and Feg meaning sound. It's just nonsense, It's like, oh.
Well, I mean, when I heard that, though, the whole light and sound translation, I mean, it also, and I wondered how conscious you this was on your end as a writer, but it seemed to me like distilling the definitions of cinema itself, and that the fact that the movie becomes like a mesmerizer at a certain point. There's a sequence that
that's totally true. I mean, it's kind of, the film itself is built backwards from the idea of, what are the strengths of cinema, and it's light and sound, and how do you put these at the front of a story rather than have them pushed to the back? So the music becomes diegetic and non-diegetic at the same time. The lighting effects are no longer effects, but they are part of the story. So that was part of the building blocks of the project, when I started thinking about what have I got, what are the strengths here that I can put forward, and what do I want to see? I want to unleash Clint Mansell and let him be at the front of the movie rather than it's a kind of a reverse version of what was done in Rebecca, where it was lots of kind of music beds and underscore, and so this is like the other end of it, where it's massive amounts of in your face sound as spectacle.
I understand that Clint had some pretty creative means of creating sounds in this film, including using plants themselves. Can you speak to that process?
Yeah, I mean, there was something that he found, this thing called the MIDI sprout, which is a kind of an intermediary bit of equipment between plants and synthesizers. So it reads the bioelectrical pulsing of a plant. So if you touch a plant, it makes a noise, basically. So then he fed that into his mad scientist kind of keyboard setup and started kind of duetting with plants, which is fantastic, I think.
And this would have all been done remotely, of course, right? Like you never got to see this process, or
yeah, but that's not unusual. I mean, you would have on the music side, because he lives in LA anyway, so I'm not there often. So you'd usually get. And this is which was enjoyable about this movie particularly, was that you'd usually get demos, and then the demos would then be arranged, and then you'd go to an orchestra, and then you'd have the final version of the movie and all come together. But with this, it's like it's all by Clint's hand. It's come from his synthesizers to the movie directly. There's no translation or replaying or reorchestration of any of it.
And was he doing this while you guys were shooting? I heard that it was a rare opportunity where you got the score before you actually began to edit.
Yeah, I mean, it partially it was to do with, the COVID thing meant that there was a much longer prep period. And generally I've been talking to Clint at early stages on scripts over the last few years. So I kind of say, oh, what do you think of this? And he'll read something, and then we'll talk back and forth before the movie. It's not in normal kind of processes. You get the financing, and then you put the heads of department in place, and then you'd go from there. But this started with the script. So I think it was as soon as I did the first draft, I sent it over to Clint, and then we started bashing backwards and forwards kind of ideas.
And you were writing up until the shoot this time. You didn't have, this was a really condensed and compressed production schedule in general, right? From script.
Well, no more or less than we normally would do, to be honest. It's just everybody else tends to take much longer on making films than we do. But I think, going back to what you're saying about Halloween, it was like that world of making movies in 15 days or even shorter, if you go back to like Shock Corridor, which is, I think, 12 days, or Gun Crazy, which is like 6 days or something like that, or to the really hardcore Corman stuff, which can be 3 or 4 days, So this B movie making, these are the schedules you have for B movies, and that then with those budgets then will dictate the amount of prep that you have. So mostly, something like Kill List, I think my prep for that was like 2 days. Just rocked up and went around the location, all right, and then we did it, and I think that and then the post was really short on that film as well. So I think that it's only in recent history that you have these B movies which are like $7 million and people take 2 years over them. That's not normal. Normal is this.
You've done a lot of television too, where you don't have that prep time too. You're kind of thrown into it.
TV, like a 45 minutes of TV is a 9-day shoot, 9-day prep, 9-day post. Mm-hmm. And then you're done, and that's Sopranos. That's how that was done. And it's brilliant. And I think that comes from a kind of, that's like a Hollywood B movie structure, because you do 2 knots of 9, it gets you 90 minutes. So that's about right, about 18 days.
One of your other frequent collaborators, at least in recent years, is Dan Martin, who does some incredible prosthetics in the film. Can you speak to your relationship working together? And how much fun did you guys have in those sequences, in creating those sequences? Were they all initially on the page too? There's certain gags that are definitely on the page, but I'm wondering what Dan kind of brought to the process, if he had any specific ideas to some of the viscera.
Yeah, with Dan, I went to him early on, and I kind of went, what have you got in your studio? What's all the stuff that you didn't get to use in other movies that we can use? And that was the start. That was to try and, to draw him in a bit. And it ended up being very specific to the film, of course. But yeah, I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed prosthetics and practical effects, and it was great fun. And the thing about Dan is as well, he's fast. And I think usually you talk to an assistant director or a producer about prosthetics and their heart sink, because they go, oh, right, so this one scene is now going to take half a day because it's, because we've got to deal with all the pumps and lines and all this kind of stuff and all these extra people. But it wasn't like that. It was just like bang, 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 really, really quick. And and Dan's work is just incredible. So it was, it was fast, but it wasn't compromised in any way.
Yeah, and is the trick for doing prosthetics and because the thing with prosthetics is, you don't know if it's going to work, and if it doesn't work, you're still there shooting it. Is the trick just find someone as good as Dan, ultimately?
Well, yeah, it's part of that, but it's also it's planning. So, say in some of the scenes, there's stuff with limbs, and there's a thing with a foot, and you would usually, the actor would go, okay, right, I'm going to go and have the prosthetic put on. They disappear off for 4 or 5 hours and come back. And if you don't schedule it in the morning, then you're kind of screwed, because if it happens that you're going to do the prosthetic in the middle of the day, then you're losing half a day on that actor. And when you've only got 4 casts, that's a problem. But what we did is we just ended up cheating the feet so that they were on a double. So they're not really the actor's feet sometimes in the thing, definitely not in other occasions, but there's other parts where you think that's a real foot that's got a prosthetic on it, but you just get another actor in, and so then you can just shoot, boom, you don't stop, you go straight through. And it's that kind of, if you're not on the ball with that kind of thinking, then you can get properly screwed.
Yeah. There's around that part of the film, there are these ritualistic tableaus that the character Zach is creating with two of the other characters in the film, and that in particular reminded me of a film that this film seems to be somewhat of a spiritual sequel to, which is A Field in England, because that film also had tableaus. I remember asking you when we did a Q&A about that film about those tableaus, and they were largely inspired by wood carvings, I believe. Like that was one of the sort of visual composition influences, and I was was that a similar influence to these compositions? Where do these sort of compositions that Zach aligns the bodies in come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is definitely an echo to the other film, and it's a conversation across the two films, really back and forth and moving through time. But the concept behind that stuff was it's been something I've been thinking about for years, where there's something really odd, really spooky about the idea of someone drugging you and then photographing you when you were drugged and then dressing you up like a doll and then kind of putting you back into your clothes again. So your reality is completely skewed. And also when you see the photographs, you're almost being betrayed by yourself. You've done something, you've become an image, but you didn't, that you never gave permission for, and yet it's there, it's a real thing outside yourself. And that was kind of where I was going with that. And that's part of the kind of the way that the way that the characters are kind of praising making their own kind of reality in their own art, almost that is a way of like an early version of iconography of a religion itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's only hitting me now too that we were talking about light and sound as a cinematic property, but specific light as a photographic property, and these are in a sense rituals that are offered up to, we assume, Feg, like that he's doing this for that. It was it's so much of this movie is about trying to communicate with something that that we don't know how to communicate with, and it just seems to me that like photography and cinema itself become vehicles for that in this film.
It is literal magic, though. That's what magic is cinema, and photography is magic, and he says it in the film, and it still blows my mind. It's an alchemical process which literally appears in front of your eyes, and it's and I think that's modern magic, isn't it? Yeah.
One thing that I want to stress to people who watch this at home is that if you have a good sound system, crank this film up, because I wish I'd seen this movie in a theater. It just feels like it's been designed in a way to like viscerally affect my organs as I watch. You haven't had a chance to see it in the theater yourself, have you?
Well, I've seen it in a mixing theater, but I've never seen it with an audience, and that's the big sadness. Even though it's been on release in the States in cinemas, but I'm not seeing it. So I'm hoping when it goes on release here to go around and take it to a few cinemas and watch it with people.
Well, I think it would be great to watch with an audience, because I think what you do so well as in this film and in many of your films is this tension between horror and comedy. Because I actually think this film, and I hope it doesn't offend, I think it's frequently very very funny.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it playing at Midnight Madness. I mean, it would have. I'd love to have seen it with that big crowd. I mean, geez, it was designed for that, really.
What do you think is that tension, though? About I think about this a lot. I think about how with these types of movies and with horror cinema in general, there always is an element of comedy, no matter how severe, or at least the audience feels compelled to laugh. But it's never, it's something that often the filmmakers accept and understand and are like, no, that's part of the experience. I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts about that relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've made non-funny horror films.
Yeah,
and there's something punishing about that over time. If it's relentlessly horrible, then it's a very different thing. And I remember at the time when we were doing the press for Kill List, and I was saying a lot, it was this thing of like the difference between a horror film and a horrible film, and like that you can make a horrible film and you certainly get a reaction from the audience, but it's, they don't really recover from it. I mean, I remember coming to do the Q&A for Kill List at Midnight Madness, and you could feel the palpable misery in the room. People were really cross,
I was at that screening, and I remember a friend of mine asked you, I think this was as you were leaving the theater, he said, why did Neil laugh at the end of the movie? Like, why was there laughter after all of that? And you just coyly said, the irony.
Yeah.
So I do feel like as dark and as horrible as your films get, there is this underlying irony.
There were jokes in Kill, but it wasn't, I remember going, we went to the awards thing for where the Raid won for one Midnight Madness, and they did a thing. I think it was 10 films. Was there in Midnight Madness that year?
Yeah,
I think, something like that. And they did a countdown from 8, and 8 most popular movies. We were the only other people there with the Raid, right? And we weren't in the 8. We were in the bottom 2. So I'm like, oh man, that's brutal.
Well, I mean, you came back though and won it with Free Fire.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's fine. That's how I can tell that story, because otherwise it would sound like absolute sad grape. But yeah, it was quite amazing seeing their happy faces, the people from the Raid.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and to those of you who are watching this before you've watched the movie, just go and watch In the Earth. And if you could recommend a film to maybe watch within the world. I don't know. Have you been watching a lot of movies in the pandemic times?
No, I've not watched much. I mean, I think I watched the entire back catalogue of John Carpenter. Well, and the ones I hadn't seen. So I hadn't seen Ghosts of Mars or Children of the Damned, or what is it? Village of the Damned or whatever. I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed.
I'm a big Ghosts of Mars fan.
I really enjoyed Ghosts of Mars. It was just like, I don't understand. I went back and read all the reviews. I'm like, these people are idiots. This film is fantastic. Anyway.
To me, and I don't mean this as a pejorative at all, Ghosts of Mars feels like you're attending a greatest hits tour concert. It's Carpenter kind of hitting all the things he's ever done.
What is your problem with that?
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's perfect.
I literally went to see him do his greatest hits concert tour, and that was fantastic as well, with him just like playing the keyboards along to the stuff with it being projected behind him. No problem with that at all. And I don't know. I just think it's nice. It's one stuff that's got a bit of distance. You can properly enjoy it for what it is, which is, it's got loads of people getting their heads chopped off with buzzsaw blades. I mean, what do people want?
All right, I've decided the double bill of In the Earth and Ghosts of Mars. Everyone, let's. It's an interplanetary double bill. I think correlations can be observed in both films. Thank you so much, Ben. This has been great. I can't wait to watch the film with an audience after I see it, of course, on the TIFF Digital Bell Lightbox digital cinema platform. And I hope to see you in a cinema very soon too, with either this film or your next.
Thank you so much.